Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Have History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and I had a person comment on one of my videos about who was better, Bragg or McClellan, and I thought that would be a tremendous video, so here it is. A video discussing which of the two most criticized commanders of either side was better. If you'd like to support the channel and help me create videos like this and my animated battle maps, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, purchase something from the Teespring store or Etsy shop, and join the Patreon page. Every little bit helps. Thank you. First, let's start with Braxton Bragg. He was given command of the Army of the Mississippi, soon to be the Army of Tennessee after Beauregard was removed after Corinth, Mississippi fell. Before that, he was a corps commander at Shiloh, and before that, he was guarding Pensacola. He exhibited no great skill or abilities in either of those endeavors. At Shiloh, it was his troops that tried and failed to dislodge Union troops from the Hornet's Nest. He gained most of his fame from his time in the Mexican-American War, being a very capable artillery officer, but that didn't translate to commanding an army. His first major endeavor as an army commander was his invasion of Kentucky in the fall of 1862. It was hoped that this invasion would bring Kentucky into the Confederate fold, as well as provide the Confederacy with more troops from that state. It did neither. Jefferson Davis greatly miscalculated Kentucky's stance in the war. At the Battle of Perryville, Bragg won a tactical victory against only a portion of the Union Army of the Ohio. When he and Edmund Kirby Smith's Army of East Tennessee failed to come together, Bragg retreated back into Tennessee, the Kentucky campaign having been a complete failure. At Stone's River, Bragg constructed a great plan for trapping the Union Army against the river on the Nashville Pike. His battle lines were deep, but some of his subordinates lost cohesion in the attack, resulting in William S. Rosecrans and the newly named Army of the Cumberland to hold on. Bragg was completely outmaneuvered during the Tullahoma campaign, and he gave up Chattanooga fairly easily. At McLemore's Cove, as the Union Army was crossing Lookout Mountain, he had an opportunity to crush part of the enemy's force, but again, one of his subordinates, Thomas C. Hindman, failed to launch his attack as planned. At the Battle of Chickamauga, Bragg's overall plan for pushing Rosecrans and the Army of the Cumberland away from Chattanooga was sound, but plans don't always go as expected. Over the course of the battle, Bragg failed to communicate effectively with his subordinates, and when his plans weren't followed through with, he took matters into his own hands and ordered the divisions in under his authority instead of going through the proper chain of command. Despite the miscommunication, James Longstreet's wing of the army busted through the Union line. When Longstreet wanted support, Bragg was distraught and believed that the battle had already been lost. His confidence was one of the biggest problems he had. At the battles around Chattanooga, Bragg was overconfident that Grant wouldn't attack him, or at least not at the time that he did. That's one reason he was willing to send Longstreet away to Knoxville, weakening his force. He was even in the process of sending him 2 more divisions when some of Grant's attacks began. There are 2 big problems in those battles. One, Bragg could not get along with his subordinates, and this caused chaos in the ranks, and 2, he did not properly fortify his position. After that defeat, Bragg was removed from command of the Army of Tennessee. George B. McClellan would help form and take command of the Army of the Potomac after the Union defeat at the First Battle of Bull Run. Many Northerners viewed McClellan as the man who would defeat the Confederacy based on his knowledge of logistics and his experience with railroad management. McClellan's first large campaign, after repeated prodding by President Lincoln to move his army, was the Peninsula Campaign in Virginia. He commanded an immense force, made landing on the end of the peninsula made by the James and York Rivers, and led a slow advance toward the Confederate capital at Richmond. When he was doing this, he was facing Confederate Army Commander Joseph E. Johnston, a general not known for his brazen attacks. Johnston fell back with each attack that McClellan launched. Johnston's troops were pushed all the way to Richmond, when he himself was seriously wounded. Robert E. Lee would be put in command and launched a series of hard-hit attacks against the right flank of McClellan's army, and although many of the attacks were repulsed, McClellan fell back. Although outnumbered, Lee was able to beat back McClellan and send him back down the peninsula. The next campaign that McClellan commanded in was during Robert E. Lee's first invasion of the North, taking his forces into Maryland. A copy of Lee's instructions to his commanders was lost. McClellan's troops found them, and the Union Army commander knew that Lee's forces were divided, with part of it going to capture Harper's Ferry and he still didn't capitalize on the information. He won a small victory at South Mountain, and at the Battle of Antietam, McClellan's lack of aggression allowed Lee to maneuver his troops to defend against the Union attacks. Shortly after that, McClellan was replaced by Ambrose Burnside. Now that I've covered a brief summary of their time as Army commanders, let's assess. In general, when each man launched an invasion, Bragg definitely moved quicker than McClellan. McClellan was extremely slow when maneuvering his army up the peninsula, but for the most part, Bragg coordinated movements pretty well. During the Tullahoma campaign, he was outmaneuvered, but never got pinned down. When it came to attacking the enemy in pitched battle, I don't think there is any debate. Bragg was the more aggressive of the two, and the one who came up with better plans. If you haven't checked out my animated battle map for Stones River, please do. It will put this element into perspective. When Bragg attacked, he put forward as much of his force as possible without depriving himself of a reserve. One of the biggest reasons the attack at that battle failed was because one of his subordinates went the wrong direction and opened a gap, forcing the second line of Confederates to be prematurely engaged, losing its punching power. The only time I can see McClellan demonstrating anything close to Bragg's aggression is the engagements early in the Peninsula campaign, for instance around Williamsburg and Yorktown, but those attacks were not as deliberate as the ones that Bragg would order. On the defensive, Bragg only has one huge example of his army on the defensive, and it was one of the biggest blunders of the war, the Battle of Missionary Ridge. However, if you look at McClellan's activities on the defensive, like on the 7 days, you find a commander whose troops fended off attacks, but when the fight was over, he didn't launch a counterattack when the enemy's troops were depleted or exhausted. He actually retreated himself. Both men exhibited horrible characteristics as a general on the defensive. One ability that I have always stressed about how to judge a commander is their adaptability. How well does a commander adapt to a situation? Because nothing goes exactly according to plan, so how does a general respond to the situation? In Bragg's case, like at Chickamauga, he became distraught and lost confidence. McClellan, like on the peninsula, when he got a little bit of resistance, decided to pull back. Neither man adapted to situations well. Another big element in deciding a great commander is their ability to get along with their subordinates. Here is where the two men greatly diverge. Bragg's entire military career was known to be combative with other commanders. While commanding the Army of Tennessee, he had little respect for the generals under him, and he never tried to win them over to his side. This caused a lot of problems when battles took place. McClellan, for the most part, got along with his subordinates, but it was more of his own superiors that he never got along with. McClellan believed his own hype of being a great commander and didn't want to listen to politicians, particularly the president, who begged him to launch an offensive. At one point, McClellan ignored the president who came to visit and speak with him. On the other side of the coin, Bragg got along great with Jefferson Davis. I guess a better title for this video would be Who Was the Least Bad? I think both had their problems as outlined in this video, but I would be scared to put either one of these men in command of an army. McClellan would probably preserve your army, but you wouldn't get any solid victories. Bragg had good ideas, but if something went wrong, then I'd be concerned that he would basically give up. I'd like to say that I wouldn't choose either one, but that wouldn't be fair to those who watch the video. In the end, I would choose Braxton Bragg. There was one big deciding factor in choosing Bragg over McClellan. If I was president, I would much prefer someone who would attempt to do what I asked. Bragg listened to Davis, and although he didn't get along with his other generals, he would give a good effort to accomplish a task that he was given. McClellan moved on his own time and didn't listen to the president. Now, I wrote down McClellan initially, then changed it to Bragg, then changed it back to McClellan, then settled on Bragg. So if you ask me next week, I may have changed my mind, but as of the creation of this video, I will put more faith in Bragg than McClellan. Do you all agree with my assessment? If not, let me know why you would choose McClellan. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great day.